people. So, as you know, I started Socrates Cafe in 1996, in the fall of 1996, with this idea that people in the United States were deeply polarized. It was during the second term of the Clinton administration when he was undergoing impeachment proceedings. And I was trying to create an alternative to argument and debate. Everybody, I mean, in the US, everybody can easily get into argument and debate mode very quickly, and attack mode. But at a Socrates Cafe, we all win by not feeling that we have to win an argument or a debate. The idea is that we win by engaging in thoughtful exploration and inquiry, by looking at what speaks for and against, and for and against and or against a variety of perspectives. We all win by not just thinking up our next zinger and wanting everything to swirl around us, by listening carefully to one another and maybe in a gentle, non-threatening way, pushing people to develop further their perspectives than they would in a typical conversation, which requires really careful listening skills. But if you feel like you have to win the day with your point of view, then this isn't for you. If you feel like it's got to swirl around you, it's not for you. It just can't be all things to all people. It doesn't mean it's squishy. I mean, you should be impassioned about your point of view. But it does mean that you really want to open yourself up to new possibilities. I think even if you leave a discourse like this at the end more entrenched than ever in your own perspective, just the mere fact that you made the heartfelt attempt to carefully listen to other people is a win-win. I think that's transformative in and of itself. So that's what Socrates Cafe is all about. There's, as I wrote in my introduction to How Can We Give Peace a Chance, there's a lot of warring going on just within ourselves, within families, long-term friendships. I've had friends who've been friends for 40 years who have unfriended one another on Facebook because they've argued over things like abortion or over things like Donald Trump. This is just in the US. There's incendiary things going on just within our souls sometimes. And I think they're probably all much more interconnected than we sometimes meet the eye. But I do think that if we take the time to use a timely, timeless philosophical question to listen to one another's stories as a pretext for listening to one another's stories, then that can be a very healthy exercise. If we achieve no other common ground, but just by agreeing that we do need to hear one another out somewhat, that again to me is something that's so vital and important. And I think that Socrates Cafe is not meant to be the only way to do this. It's just meant to complement and supplement other forms of engagement, inquiry, discourse, and of course, at times argument. But at first, what's the point of argument if we don't feel some sense of connection with one another? There have been a lot of stories on some groups about discourse and deliberation where their argument is that, well, once we know one another, then the odds are much greater that we'll get along. I'm not so sure about that right now. I've seen so much strife among families and among communities in this day and age that I think that inquiry and exploration using a method is more vital than ever. So the question that I posed today was, how can we give peace a chance? There's a lot of things we got to look at. Well, what do we mean by peace? What do we mean by giving it a chance? Do we always want peace? If so, what kinds do we want to talk about? Is peace the same as nonviolence? Is there sometimes when there has to be, is there a violent kind of peace? I don't know. But I want y'all to sort of, challenge the premise and the question whenever you feel like it. But, but also take it in directions that I might not see. Once we start exploring the question, it's your question. But the only way I know how to do this and replicate the Socrates Cafe style is just to get started. And since we are doing it by this incredible video thing, I'm not. It probably would be good if you could sort of do this if you want to say something. And I'm just going to switch back and forth between the two screens that I have. But it means so much to me just to have the gift of your time and to engage with me in this. And I think that having a platform like Zoom opens up a new world of possibilities for how we might concoct some new strategies for giving peace a chance. But so at the outset, who would like to get the ball rolling? Just what is your initial response to this question? How can we give peace a chance? Who would like to get the ball rolling? Anybody just want to? Okay, Martha.
I want to come for, I'm sitting in my car and I have to go back to, I'm volunteering today, but I did not want to miss this. So how can we give peace a chance? First of all, by showing up, being present to the idea. It's not a liberal or conservative idea. It's an idea that whose time has come, Chris, and maybe in this forum, we can bring it up again. But we flippantly use the word peace a lot. And exactly what kind of peace am I interested in? At least getting my words out and having someone listen to them. And then I reciprocate by listening to your point of view. Can we just at least start there?
Well, so to you, peace is when you say starting there, peace in your non-flippant definition is just hearing one another out.
Opening up the conversation that is not confrontational.
Well, sometimes though, people say things that push my buttons, or they're so, they might say something that I consider defamatory to, or misogynist about women, or have views about children and how children should or shouldn't be treated, that I have trouble with that sometimes. Do you?
Yes, I was an educator for almost 40 years, so I have some pretty direct ideas on how I believe, I perceive, I know for certain how children should be treated, children's rights. I'm also a woman, a mother, a wife, and so I have some other connections that I have. Literacy in the arts. So I have many tenets that I think we can use actually for peace. And so I'd like to get some other input as to how do you approach people that are difficult to approach. Maybe
and they might consider you difficult to approach if you don't harbor the same view. I mean, I hear racist statements about Mexicans, which really get me going.
Remember, I'm spending the day.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm spending the day.
I think, I spend a lot of time with indigenous groups, and the racist statements I hear about indigenous groups and how they're less than. If they won't use those terms overtly, but it's all quite there in their whole way of saying things. Okay, who else would like to say something? Thank you so much, Martha. Who else has anybody have their hand up? Who wants to go? Okay, Steve Stokes. Let's unmute you, Steve. Hold on. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Stokes. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And for the last 20 years, I've moderated Atlanta's Philosophy Cafe. And we meet on the second Wednesday of the month, so we're meeting tonight. I wanted to sort of set a foundation here and observe that we live in a less than peaceful universe.
What do you mean by that?
The universe is indifferent to us. It could care less about us as living beings. We just happen to be in it, and it is a very hostile universe. We're very lucky that Earth is where it is, and it allowed for us to evolve and become on the planet. And
whatever, or it's about.
Go ahead.
I'm hearing voices.
I do all the time.
So I think
that's a different story.
Peace is something that we have to create, that we have to etch out in this hostile environment. Peace. It doesn't just exist as a status quo.
Okay, so Steve, peace is what?
Peace is something we have to create if we're going to have.
Well, what is it? What is it?
It's that feeling when you walk out in the morning and you're like the only one awake yet, and you hear the world around you, and you have all your needs currently filled. You're not in danger, and you have no hostility towards anything around you.
So,
that
so
is a
how does
state of,
Steve Stokes address that concretely? How do you create that environment, not just for you, but for others?
well, I created through my idea of morality, which is the monologue, which is to never do to another person that which I wouldn't want done to myself. And I think if everyone lived by that, if everybody was not doing to others what they wouldn't tolerate, we would have a world of peace among humanity.
Mhm.
I'm very disturbed today because of what's going on between Turkey and the Kurds and Syria and Russia and the United States. As an American, I'm very distressed that we seem to be in a position of abandoning people that have worked side by side with us
Mhm.
to counter a negative in the world, and we're just abandoning them. And it doesn't seem to be as if we're doing it through any sort of thoughtful process. It just seems more like a whim, or even maybe, if I'm very cynical, self-serving one person's monetary gains.
Oh,
Um,
that's, you think that's cynical?
I think that's cynical. I mean, really cynical to point to one person and
Mhm.
say, you're just doing this because it enriches you
Right.
in some sort of financial way.
Okay. So,
And
I mean,
you,
so throughout human history, I think that we've quite often pointed to one person and said, it's because of him that a lot of these problems have occurred. And instead of sort of looking at the mirror and asking ourselves what we can do. And I'm wondering what we can do to counteract that. Steve, I'm going to stop with you for a little bit so we can get some others involved. There's still some people who have. So, Kit Hanley, what do you have to say? And then I'll come to Janie, and then we'll move on to other people. Kit? Kit, I don't hear you. Let me come back to you. Janie, what did you want to say?
I just was going to say, I'm Janie. I do programming in a small town in Maine, and Chris has been up to speak up here. We had a Socrates Cafe and now a Democracy Cafe. So at the Democracy Cafe last night, we started off talking about the Supreme Court, but we really were talking about actions that you can take and how people used to take, like to fight Vietnam and to fight for civil rights, that people actually did end up on the streets, which is kind of antithetical, but that to get to peace, that people maybe need to get a little bit more riled up. This is our kids' future, and that we've all become a little sleepy, and that we aren't really putting it out there and taking action. And then the other thing that I think is
wait. Let's stop there for a sec. Let's don't move on. So you say it's rather antithetical, but sometimes there has to be non-peace in order to lead to peace. I'm thinking of Nelson Mandela, who had to engage, who did engage in violent acts. What even he might have admitted would be considered by the powers at the time to be terrorist acts. I was thinking about Martin Luther King, who may have needed a Malcolm X in order to further his, not Martin Luther King's nonviolence, that you needed somebody who was willing to be rather violent to complement that. So what does that say? Jane?
Well, I'm just going to add the other part too, because I think it's a big part. So I feel my role here at the library is to build community within our community, to get like people talking and to have these conversations. But I don't know if any of you have read Thomas Friedman's book, Thank You for Being Late, but sort of his action plan at the end is at a community level, if you can get people engaged yourself to say, I invite you to this, I want an open table, I'm going to invite you over to dinner. He has some amazing statistics that, you know, white people mostly hang with white people, and black people with black people, and Hispanic people with Hispanic people, and that the true sign of a community is when your kids play together, and that those are the people you actually go out to dinner with and have over. And then I feel like then you aren't just a person saying I should be protesting, but you're building community that says we believe this, and then you've got some clout, but you also have that amazing energy and feeling that you are part of a really cool high energy team that is going to make a difference. And to me, it gets back to the messiness of it, but to say, what do we as a group, and finding like-minded people like this to say, let's take some action. What can we do? I'm a doer, right? Let's do something.
So it has to be like-minded people.
Well, I think you have to have a common cause. So if somebody thought we should be fighting in Vietnam and somebody else thought we shouldn't, you're not going to get on the street to protest the war like we did.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I was actually thinking about our founding fathers and mothers who all agree that revolution was needed, but had very different ideas for how that could be achieved.
They were, but they were also all ready to hang. If they didn't hang together, they were going to hang apart, and they could have very likely all have been, killed. But it's big stuff, and then, but community helps, I feel like, if you're building your base.
Community helps. Okay, Janie, thank you. So somebody from another part of the globe, anybody got their hand up?
Hello.
Hello. Zilka from Sarajevo, how are you?
Yes, from Sarajevo. Hello to everyone. I'm sorry we are late. I'm here with 3 of my colleagues, Azra,
Hello.
Amina, and Nicolina. So hi, and we just arrived from a small city nearby Sarajevo, Zenica, where we had the first Socrates Cafe in Bosnia tonight. And we are really thrilled. We have over 35 young people discussing an interesting question, why we lie. So
the question
really
for you is, so what is your thoughts about, it's so wonderful to have you here. And I was delighted out of my mind to get your message the other day. But how do we give peace a chance? What's your initial thoughts about that?
Wow, that's a really hard question. How to give peace a chance. I've been working for a long time on peace building and reconciliation in the post-war context of the Balkans and Bosnia, primarily with women, because my interest is gender and peace building, how women contributed to peace. There are many ways, I would say, how to give peace a chance. And it depends where we are engaged and where our voices can be heard, and what channels we should use, to use our voices to support peace initiatives.
So this idea of all voices need to be heard, it seems like some voices are heard more than others, and that some voices that I hear, I would rather not hear. So is that really true, that we should hear all voices, that we should strive for that?
Every peace builder I've worked with said that every voice matters and everyone should be heard, because as human beings, we want to be heard, we want to be acknowledged.
I understand.
And if you do something in your local community or in your country, you want to be heard, you want to be acknowledged. But I'm not sure that it's possible to hear all voices.
I'm thinking, what if the voice that wants to be heard is one who says there's certain groups of humans who are subhuman, who are less than men?
Wow, maybe I should give a chance to my colleagues also to contribute. Nicolina or Azra, would you like to? No, oh, they are shy.
Well, we'll come back to you. We're just getting started. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are really privileged to be part of this group, and we hope to learn a lot from you. We also hope that we can share some of the lessons from our own context.
Absolutely. It's just a delight. It makes my heart soar to see people from truly all over the globe who care about this. Hadi, how about you? Can I pick on you? Hadi has established, how do I unmute you, Hadi? Hadi has established Socrates Cafes throughout Saudi Arabia, and there's also one in Bahrain, many started by women, and it's become thriving. He actually has translated my Socrates Cafe book into Arabic, and it's coming out soon. So Hadi's a medical doctor who attended the first Socrates Cafe in Montclair, New Jersey. So I'm so delighted that you took the time, Hadi.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us, and it's really great experience to have everyone here with us. So hello to everyone from Saudi Arabia. Glad to be with all of you. I'm just listening to all your thoughts, and I'm thinking, as usual, I didn't have something to say yet. But thank you for putting me on the spot. But what I'm thinking is that while you were talking about how do you give peace a chance, I was thinking I love to ask questions about the question as I learned from you, and you started with the definition of peace. It wasn't enough. I was waiting to hear more about how we define peace.
Yes.
But then I had another question in mind, and why do we need peace? Do we actually need peace? That's a question that I'm thinking of now. And to answer the question itself, maybe I'll get back to you later.
Well, Hadi, whether we do or don't need it, what are we talking about when what are you talking about when you're talking about peace? Where does that concept come from and within and your culture and your belief system? How does it apply?
So I'm thinking of opposites to understand peace. That's what's coming to my mind. So two words came to mind: fear. I don't want to live in fear. I want to live in peace, and I don't want to live in anxiety. Those are the two words that came to my mind that I can define peace with as an opposite. So it's a state of mind, I'm guessing. I'm not sure. I'm assuming it's a state of mind that it's very helpful for our prosperity or growth, and it's not that we cannot live without it, but we can live better with it.
Okay, Hadi, who's with you?
This is Muhammad Al-Khamis. He's actually new to our group. Yeah.
Hi.
Does he have any thoughts that he wants to share right now?
Not really. I just want to hear. It's the first time for me to join with Hadi, and yes.
Okay, you've already been victimized by the Chris Phillips. Let's put people on the spot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, who else wants to say something? Okay, Sandy. Okay.
Hi.
Sandy, where are you based?
I'm between Baltimore and DC.
Baltimore and DC.
Yeah. So, yeah, just what Hadi was saying, I agree with that a lot. Just kind of having that state of mind of not having to live in fear and everything. And I guess it's, some people have to worry about that in more extreme versions than others. But like you were saying before is it like, can peace involve violence, and like, does peace sometimes require violence? I think that kind of reminds me of what we're encountering in the US with like Antifa right now. Like there's been kind of a rise in anti-Semitic acts of violence, I guess, and then in response to that, it seems like there's been a rise in anti-fascist protests and stuff. And I think a big question right now is like, should people support anti-fascist protesters because they, the way that they differentiate themselves from other types of protesters is that they're willing to use violence in response to fascist violence. So I think that's kind of, like the paradox of tolerance, that kind of thing, I think is a big question right now.
So does violence, regardless of its intent, does it beget more violence, or does it depend? What is the goal? If violence is used, what's the goal?
I think, it can be tough because to me the goal is to not have violence, to have as little violence as possible. But I think in order to get that, it seems like violence is sometimes necessary. But I think, it really does depend, because you have to make sure that by using violence, you're not just inciting more violence, and it's hard to tell where that line is and when it should be used.
Are there times when, if you have a long-term goal towards peace, where you have to recognize that over the short term, it is going to beget violence and there may be unintended consequences?
I think so. I think that's definitely the case. In a lot of scenarios. I mean, it's hard to know when, even in the grand scheme of things, like a war or something, like when like an amount of violence like that that's working towards a long-term goal of peace or something is necessary, and or when you're just using the violence for your own intentions that are kind of away from the point.
Because things can be murky. I mean, you look at the Hong Kong protests right now, and there's varying motives there besides just achieving democratic freedoms. Sometimes you might say that's your motive, but you may have others as well. You may have anti-corporate notions and anarchic notions, even if you don't state it outright, because you may not get the same inspired followers. So how do we know when to hold them and when to, and when to join with others who may not see completely eye to eye with us, but we have that.
Chris, can you hear me?
Who's that?
This is John Nyquist.
Yes, just let me, hold on just one second. Sandy, thank you so much. Where's,
I'm on a new computer today.
there you are. Okay, John, you want to say something?
Yeah.
From
All
San
right,
Francisco. John does the San Francisco Socrates Cafe.
Right. Okay, give peace a chance. This is going to be very controversial, but I got to say it. You attain peace when you have won the war.
Lost it again.
Say that again, John. Say it again.
Peace is attained when you have won the war.
What do you mean by that?
When the war is over, you live in peace.
Right.
When you have won the war, you have attained peace. That's how you get peace, by winning the war.
Can you give me an example?
Well, sure. Best example of ever is World War II. After World War II, the United States lived in many years, actually a couple of decades of peace. Homeland. We've never been in a declared war since the end of World War II.
We've had incursions, conflicts, but they've
Yes, we
never.
have.
Yeah, we've only had a handful of declared wars in U.S. history, actually. Okay.
And is peace? Peace is too nebulous to really talk about being something that we can actually attain, because
Well, let's quit looking at it as an entity and what it does. What does
like
peace
24
do?
hours a day are we at peace?
Right.
I'm at peace. Are you?
Oh, I'm roiling, bro. I'm roiling within.
Okay.
I am. That's why I'm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. Let's. Al. Wait. Let me get Al. You had your hand up. If you could raise your hands, I'd appreciate it. Al, what do you want to say? Al with the goatee and the glasses.
Oh, it's AJ.
AJ, I'm sorry. I have cataracts, so I can't see for shit.
Oh, okay. I was a little confused because I'm like.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't see.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I know, but like. Oh yeah, no.
Al, where are you?
I'm in New Jersey. I went to the Montclair thing. I only went there for like the last 3 weeks, so I'm pretty new to it.
Awesome.
One thing one thing that does come up, referencing all the things that have been coming up, is like speaking, allowing people to talk in any circumstances is usually important. Even when the person referenced Antifa, if you look back in World War II, going back to that, there was an anti-fascist movement against the fascists, and the violence against the fascists is part of what made people had sympathy for the Nazi cause. Mm-hmm. An interesting dynamic in that, and it's like I've encountered a few people from like all different sides, and like even one person who was like had the Jewish conspiracy, like they control media, and was I can't say for certain like nationalist, but a little bit of that at least. And one thing I did to talk to him was I encountered him through a friend. I listened to what he had to say. I kind of found what his resources were. I analyzed. I pointed out. I kind of, by breaking that down, it kind of broke down some of it. And like part of it is, and like a lot of times, like there's been a TED talk for like a black guy who went to Ku Klux Klan rallies, and an ex-neo-Nazi.
Stop.
I thought okay, that was,
Could everybody else put their mics on mute, please,
Yeah.
while one person's talking?
Yeah. The black guy went to the rallies, the Ku Klux Klan rallies, because he wanted to learn about it, and eventually he became friends with the Ku Klux Klan leader, who basically made an exception for him. And like he said, he still held his belief for a long time, but he respected him. Eventually, he left the movement. There was another neo-Nazi another TED talk where he was an ex-neo-Nazi, but by setting up a store and people actually talking to him, his beliefs challenged. And one thing that was common in both the Ku Klux Klan, the person that I met, and the neo-Nazi, they all felt that they weren't being listened to. And part of it is that they expected not to be listened to. And so part of what Socrates does, the listening, is part of what actually deals with a lot of the issues, because when people don't feel listened to, they kind of become desperate, and desperation can lead to a lot of things.
So just the mere fact, if we want to, the question that we're exploring is how can we give peace a chance? Yeah. One of the best gifts we can give somebody, whether we vehemently disagree with them, especially maybe if we do, is to just hear them out.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself can be transformative.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, there's a group of high school students. Michael has the screen and they want to talk.
Okay, hold on. Hello! This is unbelievable. All right, so I can't see very well. Can you, where are you guys? I can't see. Where are you? Where are you based though? What school?
We're Trinity Valley, Chris. Fort Worth, Texas.
Fort Worth, Texas. Yippee-ki-yay. Okay, so tell me this. So what are some of your thoughts initially to the question, how can we give peace a chance?
We got Naeem who wants to say a few words about it.
I'm Naeem Audier. Thank you so much for hosting this, Mr. Phillips. I just wanted to throw out there how, I mean, especially in the beginning of the conversation, I think it's been sort of a theme throughout as well. But with, in terms of you talking about the idea of people, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. In terms of you talking about the people who might necessarily say things that offend others, or like in conversation with them, it's harder to speak with them.
Yeah.
I think lots of the time, like at least from what I've heard and learned and experienced, that comes from sort of not necessarily like a direct belief in that principle, in the principles that they're arguing for, but more of a like a sort of lack of education in that manner, or in terms of like how they've been brought up to experience those certain, or like believe those certain ideas.
Well, what makes you say that?
I mean, I just think, I mean, one story that's especially applicable that I've heard, I can't exactly remember the exact context, but I believe it was either the grandson or the godson of David Duke. He was raised in the Ku Klux Klan throughout his whole life, and he was vouching for their ideas and everything. And he wanted to go to college, but David Duke would not allow him because he didn't want him to be exposed to other ideas and everything. Mm-hmm. And then eventually when he went, people knew who he was, but they accepted him and they invited him to things, and diverse events, like a diversity of events, which sort of helped him see that the ideas he's been exposed to his whole life were not really sort of based in reality. And eventually I think he openly denounces the Ku Klux Klan, and he's openly against their ideologies. So I just think it starts at a base level with sort of like children and youth being educated about issues like this.
Starts at a base level. How many of you in your classroom have ever had, I mean, it takes a lot of guts to stand up a lot of chutzpah to stand up and take a different stance from those in your circle, whether it's family, where you might, I mean, have you ever had to sort of take a stand that was different? And has that put you in some sort of conflict, maybe with friends or family members? Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that is the case. I mean, especially when based on like sort of principles or morals that I've had for most of my life, when somebody's like ideas or something they say sort of opposes that, it's hard sometimes to say, oh, I disagree with you. But I think that's necessary, and discourse and discussion is necessary for evolving as like sort of a human race, I would say.
Discourse, discussion, argument, they're all vital.
Yeah.
That's beautifully put. Can I just say there from their teacher, Don Carlson, is one of the coolest people and most awesome educators I've ever met. I think I'm going to be visiting your school later sometime this school year, and I can't wait to be with you all in person, but I want to thank your teacher so much of taking the time. Does anybody else, before I move on, does anybody else in your class want to say something?
Oh, I want to say something. Okay, so I just wanted to say, like, to add on to the point that, like, we do need argument. Argument's not necessarily, like, associated with peace.
What's your name?
Chris.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I think that, like, argument is necessary because, like, I don't know, it helps us. Sometimes, like, we need that kind of, like, forceful interaction with different opinions to kind of realize maybe there's some faults in our own opinion, or there's some really good points that they bring up. And I think that that's necessary for peace.
Okay. That's a beautiful point. You know, this forceful interaction of different opinions, you said, is necessary. How many people have you met, though, who actually are willing to change their mind in an argument?
I think that's really true. I haven't, like, personally, like, whenever I'm in an argument with someone, like, most of the time, like, they'll submit to, like, the general consensus of the majority. And so I think maybe that's a problem with education and society. Like, we need to, like, be able to foster, like, people to have the courage to, like, kind of speak out, even if their opinion, like, varies a lot from everybody else.
Okay, that worked. Do any of the young women in your class, does anybody want to say something?
Okay. Oh, hi. I'm Karthika, as you probably heard. But basically, to go back to what Naeem said, I think that the basis of peace is really education, because from a very young age, we are taught certain ideals by our parents, by our community, by the people around us. And I think that influences what we do for our entire lives, even though a lot of people disagree. But I think that is the foundation of who we are, what we learn as we are growing up. So I think as we're exposed to whatever our parents or the people around us say are okay, or things that are wrong and right, like all these ideals are learned while we're still children. So I think a lot of our differing ideas and sense of community comes from who we are and what kind of people we've been introduced to in our lives.
And in order to give peace a chance, though, we have to expand our horizons, and that's what education's about. Is that?
I think that is what it is about, and I think it's also understanding that there will be a lot of ideas, but it really depends what you decide to do with those ideas. Like, I think peace can still exist if people believe certain things that don't agree with you. Like, say, okay, this is going to be extreme, but let's say someone believes in ideals that are very racist, but let's say they decide or are prohibited by the law not to act on them. I think peace can still exist in those circumstances where this person cannot act on these racist ideals, but an environment where that is not condoning these ideals would be peaceful.
Okay, thank you so much. That's why I love to have the input of young people in these discussions. I thank you so much. Okay, some others. Can you raise your hand if you want to say something? Tom from Montana. How about you, Tom? Can you unmute yourself?
I just did. Yes.
I was thinking that John Lennon wrote the song "Give Peace a Chance" in the late '60s when I was in college, and that was during Vietnam, and it was during a very divisive time in our history. And I was just wondering the definition: is there such a thing as absolute peace, or is it a spectrum? And I'm wondering how John Lennon and how others would feel about the relative peacefulness of our world, our country today, compared to when he wrote the song.
What are your thoughts? How do you think he would be? Or do you just don't know?
Well, I read a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, which many of you heard, and he would suggest that we're more peaceful.
In what way?
If you looked at wars, as somebody said earlier, we haven't had a declared war since World War II, and every other century, we've had significant wars that we've been involved in. Better Angels of Our Nature also graphed violence in a lot of different ways, and thought that violence was actually less now. But I'm curious what other people would think about that.
Well, let's look at that a little bit. Violence is actually less now. I mean, every time I go to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, there seems to be some conflict that could be potentially incendiary on a global scale. And so, but I also see violence. So I go to Twitter and I see not children or adolescents so much, but adults lobbing insults at each other in a way that if a child did it, they'd be probably punished or scolded. And so and it makes me, and some of them have considered themselves liberal, some conservative, but what they have in common is they love to insult one another, make fun of one another. And it depresses me so much that I try to just stay away from those things. Some people say they're acting like children, but I see children acting far more maturely than that.
I think your point about staying away from it is interesting, because I think Twitter, Facebook, maybe to a lesser extent, some of those new formats are conducive to contrary views. But I'm thinking in some ways that those views are a small group of people on opposite ends of the spectrum, and that many of us do what you just said. We stay out of those. We don't get involved in those echo chambers where there's echo chambers. Somebody comes in and says something negative and it's bashed.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to do this face-to-face video with people around the world is because on those sites you can't see each other and you can't hear each other. And it's so easy to hide behind those screens and lob your 240 character insults. So this is what, to me, creating more peaceableness is a big part of what that's all about. Can I just say that I realize now, you have to excuse me, I'm a really high-tech klutz. I see some of you have an icon that says your hands are up, and that's beautiful. I'm assuming we all have it, and that yours truly just wasn't in the know about it. So that's wonderful. If you want to say something, if you see that icon that has your hand up, that helps me so much. Nora from Saudi Arabia, who coordinates Socrates Cafes there and has been on my podcast twice. What do you have to say? Thank you for raising your hand. Now I realize there's a raise hand function.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me? Glad to be here. About the peace, I think that we have two words, inside word and outside word. I think in a very simple sentence, the peace is the similarity between these two words.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that we found or we face the same thing we expected from our inside world, we face it outside words. If we didn't, if we face the opposite, I think that will, that will be the opposite of the peace.
Will be the opposite of peace. Where does your notion and concept of peace come from? What does it come from? A certain belief system, or where?
I think I think from even the society itself.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Socrates cafes that you do there in some way contribute towards peace?
Yes, so much because I need it from my all of my inside world. So I created to the outside world. That's the world we share it all together. So I face it in reality.
Because
You make your wish came to the real world.
Because you explore some very difficult questions in your gatherings.
Yeah, sometimes.
But is it create conflict and tranquility at the same time? Discussions about women's rights. What do you think?
I think it's a difficult questions, but yes, if we meet a different minds, you will have a very beautiful answers and opinions.
Thank you so much, Norm.
Yes, thank you.
Let me go back to gallery view. There was Carl. You have your hand up. Carl from Washington D.C.
Hey, Chris, and everyone. Yeah, I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, so outside of DC, and I was just looking up. It was just about, it's in October. We had a prayer for peace at the National Cathedral, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Crosby and Nash, and also Jackson Browne, and today's Jackson Browne's birthday as well. So yeah, he has a song, World in Motion, that talks about until the world, I look out at the world, and this is the world I know this world can be, you have a volunteer in me. Part of it. And I guess I'll just bring up a couple points and stuff. I shared it with you, but Peter Elbow's a professor at University Matt. He has a believing game. So basically our whole scientific method is the doubting game, and that he's saying we need to engage in a believing game, that methodologically believing in things that you don't agree with, seeking the validity.
So you sort of immerse yourself in another belief system and take a different, sort of assume a different attitude.
Right, yeah, he's saying that we're missing the other half of it, is that we need to be, instead of just trying to tear things down, the whole falsification, that we need to be seeking the validity. And the real challenge is, can you seek validity in things that you don't agree with?
Oh, that is absolutely fascinating. Can I bring in my wife, Ceci? As you'll see, I'm wearing a t-shirt from the EZLN. That's the Zapatista Liberation Army in Chiapas, Mexico. And Ceci and I lived in Chiapas for many years, and there was a pretty, at the outset, there was pretty violent uprising for indigenous people's rights that to this day has not been resolved. And even though Mexico right now has a pretty progressive president in comparison to those in the past, they still feel like they're not being heard. In fact, he's proposed putting a train system through that region that they're quite violently opposed to. And so, Ceci, what are your thoughts about that in the context of your work as a teacher in an indigenous community in Chiapas, about giving peace a chance? Is there first, depending on the community, if it's been marginalized for generations on end, do they have to kind of take up arms at first?
Well, that's a difficult question. I'm actually not quite sure. I mean, somebody mentioned that sometimes in order to have peace, you need war. Kind of like the opposites, if for the day to happen, you need night, kind of like that. And I think most of us haven't been in a situation, well, I don't know, I shouldn't put words into, I don't know everybody's experience, but many of us haven't been in a situation where our voices haven't been heard like indigenous people in, I mean, in this case, Mexico, but I think in many places around the world it's the same. And yeah, how do you call on the attention that enough is enough? And I think there are movements where could be peaceful, and at the same time move the waters, you know, kind of thing. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I even question myself sometimes, you know, it's like, also somebody mentioned inner peace. And, you know, how do you get to inner peace? And when there's so many things happening, or when your kids don't have enough food or even medical attention.
That's a beautiful point. There's so many people in the United States who can't, they're just one emergency away from being homeless for themselves, for their families. And not just in the United States, but it's scary, and you want to be involved. You see what's unfolding on the grander scale, but how do you do that when you can't even make ends meet?
Yeah, so it's I mean, I don't think it's an easy answer. I mean, I like to think that it shouldn't be violence for us to attain peace, but I mean, I think when we truly see the other person as an equal human, meaning, you know, my way of living is interfering with their well-being. And I think for that to happen, we really need to have that, you know, that closeness to others. You know, like when I lived in an indigenous community, maybe there were conflicts, you know, I mean, there were many conflicts, but
people were kicked out for their political beliefs or religious beliefs.
Yeah, no, and, you know, you saw, like, you know, young kids, I mean, you know, teenagers or young adults, you know, fighting, and, you know, I mean, you know, a lot of violence as well. I mean, I'm not gonna romanticize it, but the community got together to see how they could be of help to those who were having these situations, rather than, you know, put them in a cage and forget about them, or, you know. And so I think that caring of seeing the other as part of yourself.
Say that again.
Yeah, like seeing the other as part of yourself. Like we cannot be in peace on our own. You know, I cannot be in peace by myself in my room. Like, I mean, I'm so sorry, but like, without meaning, I laugh when somebody said peace is when you wake up in the morning and nobody else is awake, because I could relate to that. You know, I wake up really, really early, like 4:45 a.m. every morning. And, you know, I could relate to that, but at the same time,
and I go to bed really, really late. And there's peace, finally.
So, you know, how do you really get that sense? I mean, you can't do it in your room. I mean, you can not do it isolated. I mean, I understand that feeling, but at the same time, I cannot be in peace if my kids are not in peace, you know? I cannot be in peace if other people are hungry, if we're destroying our planet. So it's like, unless we actually see how we are related and how we impact the world and how our actions impact the lives of others, you know, I mean, it's just a word. It's just an ideal. It's just that I wish we could all be peaceful and there, no war. But we're not gonna get there unless we face the difficulty of seeing the other as part of myself.
Well, I wish you were my wife. That was beautiful.
Silly.
Sihan, thank you, sweetheart. Sihan, you're in Istanbul, where there's hotspot Turkey right now. What are your thoughts?
Hello, everyone. I am in Turkey right now. Yeah. Well, it's a tough question. It's like there are like many aspects to consider. But yeah, I think avoiding conflict completely is not possible for if we look at the perspective of evolution of living beings, let's say. So I don't think it's possible to avoid conflict, but I think we should aim, like less violent conflict. If there's a conflict, we should not, it should be less violent. And
how can we do that though? How do you do that? What's the process?
Okay, that's a good question. I would like to hear other persons' ideas as well about it.
Okay. Well,
and the other thing, very important thing is actually, I think like we should depend each other. That's very important for the peace. So like if the peace is broken, we should have something to lose, like trade is also important for this, So like, let's say if there is, a conflict between like two states and they have like good trade between them, like trade is going to be, like everybody is going to suffer. So if you have something to lose, people maybe, I think it kind of affects it. Also, it's very important that the people who decide to go to war and who goes to war are different people, So like the politicians decide that the army is going to war, but most of the time it's not their sons, who goes to war. Others, so they decide for other people to go die and kill other people. So that's important. If people actually, come to the point that if they can decide for themselves, if they really want to kill and, get killed in a conflict, I think the situation would be very different. So
I've been in situations where I've had dialogues with innocent people caught in the crosshairs of conflicts that are not of their making, or soldiers sent to a war that if they don't go there, go to jail, and some do, without having really much or any control over these things.
That's true. That's very true. I think it's very important. I mean, I think, yeah, it's like we need to, like most of the countries have democracy right now, but I think in this digital age, there's a lot to be improved in this, how do we process democracy and how do we implement democracy? Like the idea of democracy is that people have a, word to say about their country, what are they going to do? But I think it's very corrupt right now and it's not functioning. Like just voting-based democracy is not, very functional right now. So I think it's important that we are now very crowded in this world, but we have like lots of power, like this meeting we are doing right now, like people from all over the world can get together and, see their faces. So I think we need to, like find new ways to get people incorporate, in this decision-making process. I think it will improve a lot our, if as I say, people can decide that if you want to die and kill, I think the outcome would be very different.
Thank you so much. Can we move from Turkey to Greece? Sarapi, would you have any thoughts from Thessaloniki? Can you unmute? Unmute that baby. Unmute. Okay, I've unmuted you. What are your thoughts?
Hello, I am Agapi from Greece, North Greece in Thessaloniki. This book came to my life.
I wrote that.
Accidentally came in my life a year ago. I have learned about you. Well, my English is not so good. I haven't spoken English for many, many years.
I'm honored. Thank you so much for coming to this.
It is not very easy for me to understand and comprehend all the meanings that you say. But I'm very glad to be with you. Well, about the question, how can we give peace a chance? Another question comes to my mind. How peaceful are we inside, in ourselves? Let's have a look to our daily program. Are we enough peaceful? Our relationships to the others, to our family, to our friends, how do we react to the situations?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who has lost a friend over a disagreement, or who knows of people where long-term friendships have been torn apart because of a disagreement, quite often over a political issue. And I keep coming back to this notion that it the breakdown of human communication itself that is at the foundation of so many of our most intractable and quite often violent conflicts. Does somebody who hasn't spoken yet want to say something? Anybody put their hand up and I'll get you. Wayne from my hometown area of Williamsburg, Virginia.
Yes, in our discussion, it has occurred to me that peace seems to be an absence of aggression by one party over another. And doesn't mean there's an absence of conflict. There can be conflict in peace, but it can be resolved through negotiations and compromise. But as soon as one party, whether it's a country or one person in a group, has power over another group and exerts it, then that is aggression, and we lose then peace in that part, in that situation. So if one party has power, such as money or possessions, another party is, or if one party feels aggrieved over historical grievances, such as we have seen too many times, then they feel obliged to be aggressive against the subject party. And sometimes it's just plain greed, as when the United States spread across the continent and took over lands held by Native Americans. So I think then I would prefer to define peace as an absence of aggression between participants.
That's interesting. I keep thinking, though, that based on these incredibly thoughtful comments and perspectives, that I'm not sure there's kinds of peace that I would want to see achieved if the whole idea is just to be civil with one another for the sake of it. Because I think sometimes you have to put it on the line and try to win the day with a certain perspective or policy. And it's very important, though, I think, to feel some sort of foundational connection with those people, even if and as you vehemently disagree with their approach. But you go through a process, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and you dust yourself off and you try again. But when there's just that breakdown of all sort of mechanisms to even try to work towards something, I see trouble looming on the horizons, if that makes any sense.
Yes, I agree. The peace is never without conflict. There are always then opportunities to make things better, and that will sometimes require intense action.
Intense action. Can you give me an example?
Well, I'm thinking of the long struggle between African Americans and the dominant society, who feels that they are, without speaking about it, without really considering it, doesn't consider them on an equal and will work against them. This conflict has to be resolved eventually, and it's been very, very painful and requires deep thought and self-examination on the part of all of us.
Self-examination. I think that's very beautifully put. Some others who want to say something who haven't, anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Steve Marchetti. Steve was, I have to introduce you all to Steve. Steve was one of the charter members of the original Socrates Cafe that I started in Montclair, New Jersey. And they still meet every Tuesday night after all these decades. And Steve was one of the very first people that I asked to be a facilitator besides me. I didn't want it to be the Chris Phillips show where Chris was always the one who showed up and everybody came to hear Chris. So I quickly asked 3 other people, one of whom was Steve, to be a facilitator, and then I was a participant because I wanted it to be this egalitarian enterprise. And Steve has done some incredible outreach at prisons, adult centers, community centers. But Steve, thanks so much for being part of this, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this question.
Well, thank you, Chris, for there being something to be part of. I just want to, let's see, just some basic things. The universe is a complex, self-organizing, dynamic system that will not stay the way we want it to stay. It's always going to change. And however successful we might be at bringing about peace, it might not last. But that doesn't mean it's not worth striving for, because the striving, it's in the striving that I find peace. The things that I do in the service of giving peace a chance are not based on how successful they are, but they're based on doing them. And doing things like this is one of those things. And I think we sell ourselves short if we're willing to settle for the absence of war, the absence of aggression, the absence of violence. If we're willing to settle for that as peace, we are selling ourselves short. Don't ask me to define what it is above that line. That would be a hard job. But I think we need to expect more of ourselves. Another thing that has come from listening to the people who have spoken so far, we have to decide for ourselves individually that there is no they. We create they to blame for the things that we find lacking. If there is only we, then we have made ourselves accountable for bringing about change, and in this case, for bringing about peace. I can only do a small thing, a tiny, tiny thing, but I can do it, and I must do it, and not blame them if it doesn't happen.
And that's actually why I started Socrates Cafe. I was tired of saying it's the politicians, it's these people, and I looked at myself in the mirror and said, well, what in my modest way can I do? And I thought back to my yaya, my Greek forebears, and what she instilled in me about Socratic inquiry, just to try to be a little bit more part of the solution than the problem. And Steve, what you said about, it seems to me like my most creative acts, like Socrates Cafe, are when I'm not at peace, when I'm in conflict with myself, I'm dissatisfied with myself, with the way, and what Nora was saying, with the way that things were on the outside too. And that, and what you said about, do you ever want to have peace once for all, or do you want some kinds of conflict? Not all conflict is bad, so you can lead to other new horizons for peacefulness.
Chris, walking has said to be controlled falling. You lean forward until you're about to fall on your face, and then you put your foot out and stop yourself from falling. The achievement of our goals, whatever they may be, including peace, and maybe foremost peace, is a form of controlled falling. It's fraught with failure. It doesn't look pretty while you're doing it, and but that's no reason not to try. That's no reason not to try.
Well, I think everybody here now knows why I asked Steve very quickly to be a facilitator. Just an amazing human being. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet who wants to say something, either just visibly show me your hand. I see some hands. Anybody who has not had an opportunity yet? Odin, how about you? Odin. I see Odin animatedly. Odin, do you want to say something? No? I want to hear you.
I'm afraid I'm at work. I can
okay.
listen in, but I can't talk.
Yeah, okay, because...
It's been fantastic.
Odin, settle down, be at peace. Okay. Okay, so Steve Stokes, you wanted to say something else from Atlanta. Steve? Steve Stokes, go ahead.
Hi, I thought you would unmute me, but anyway,
I
I see that Carl has had his electronic hand up before me. So I wanted to first make sure that I'm not passing Carl up.
No, we're doing fine.
Okay. I disagree with Steve.
Right. Well, let's not worry about agree or disagree. Just tell me your perspective.
Well, that's okay. I think that there is you and the others. Okay. And did it doesn't hurt to acknowledge that you are apart from the rest of the world and that you've got to navigate yourself amongst all these others. That they are not you, and that's where conflict comes from. I mean, if there was no other, then there wouldn't be any conflict. I mean, if we truly were always just us and there was no they, then what would we bump up against? So I think that to be a person of peace, you've got to reconcile how you move through the world when there are others that are just like you, individuals just like you. They have their aspirations, you have your aspirations, and they might not align. And so conflict, yeah, but not violence, not resolve conflict by might over right. That is truly what a civilized human should be keeping in mind, that you can't force the others to accept your solution. You've got to sell them on your solution. I mean, anything else is uncivilized. It's just the tooth over, anyway.
Thank you for that. I wonder, I keep thinking as y'all offer these wonderfully thoughtful perspectives of two of our most flourishing civilizations. One was in Florence, when there was just this incredible collaborative competition, and also in ancient Athens, when playwrights and thinkers and scientific explorers of many different sorts sort of pushed each other. And there was also a playfulness to it, a creative tension. I think the Beatles, where these, didn't last for the longest time, but when you think of what they accomplished in that cauldron of creative tension and pushing one another to heights that they otherwise wouldn't have achieved, that and I am trying to think about that on a global scale when we can connect like we are doing right now, how we can create, if we can create again, sort of that on a more global scale, that atmosphere of collaborative competition where there's a wonderful tension that helps us explore and discover kind of new horizons for being and doing and making. Anybody want to? Carl, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, first, like just completing the other thing, the Tibetan monks were rather taken aback when I said to one of my friends, like, peace, you got a problem with that? They were kind of, but I guess with peace, it's not getting to a point where people really believe that war is not necessary.
And what about what I was talking about? in terms of just achieving some sort of
Yeah,
ethos of pushing one another to and creating the fertile circumstances where we can all kind of discover and develop and contribute talents to things.
The creative tension is really so important. There's there's a book, The Path of Least Resistance, where Robert Fritz talks about that there's the oscillating structures and stuff, and that's just the pendulum swinging back and forth, and it's actually like going down and just creating ruts. And then he talks about getting to if we can get to the systemic structures, and then it's that the creativity comes in that tension.
Thank you so much, Carl. So, Manuel Sanz, do you want to say something? We're almost at the close, but I want to see if some other voices want to. And Doug.
Thank you very much for.
Chris, can I add one more thing? I'd like to say
John, can you hold on just 1 second? Go ahead, Manuel.
No, thank you so much for asking, but I don't have anything particular to say. Just quickly, I organize a Socrates Cafe in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and it's going very well. We have 2 evenings a week, and it's great to connect with you all and listen to what you have to say.
Manuel, does the group itself, is it in any way contribute to some kind of peace?
Yes, absolutely, because I think we all get to discover and hear so many different points of views from our own. We are all surprised to hear ways of thinking and way of seeing the world that are different from our own. It puts a lot of perspective to all of us. It makes us realize that we don't think the same way, we don't have the same values, the same desires. And then it pushes us to think and view different perspectives. So in that way, I think it helps us all, like it did for me.
So that's a very unique kind of peacefulness.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I asked you. John, yes, go ahead, please.
You know what's come to me in this last hour is peace within a person can come from certain characteristics, such as if I have humility, if I have love, if I have compassion, I can be peaceful with myself. And if my peaceful ambience, aura, and point of view is contagious, I can spread a peaceful point of view to other people. And if I'm peaceful and another person is peaceful, and our group becomes peaceful, we start having a peaceful group. And that can spread to a peaceful community, to a peaceful nation, to a peaceful universe. And wouldn't that be wonderful? We could give peace a chance.
Very wonderfully put. Anybody else want to say anything? I lost a lot of people after the first hour. Some kids had to go to their new class. But anybody else want to say something? Yes, Hadi.
Hi. So we have a new member here who wants to say something, and then I'll chime in.
Actually, I have a question rather than saying something. Is the feeling of peace for people living in very high tension areas like Syria, Libya, Palestine, is the feeling of peace the same for everybody? Or they feel peace differently?
Well, it's different. How is it different?
Any area of, I am asking, I'm not.
No, I'm asking you. I know. Well, what are your thoughts?
I think anybody who is, as I said, who is in the fire, feel it differently, who is just watching and saying that it is hot. Feeling the heat of the fire and you are in it, different than saying that fire is hot. So, and the need of peace for people who are living in high tension areas is really highly required.
I think that's a very important insight. I was even thinking I go to a lot of schools where there are neighborhoods where children are not safe even walking from their home to the school. in Washington,
Yeah.
D.C., and Chicago, places I've been in Mexico, and places where I've lived, where it is not, every time you walk outside the door, there was a neighborhood I lived in just until very recently, and my wife and I decided to move us and our young kids. Somebody went out to a taco stand, a 13-year-old girl, to get a taco, and she got caught in between two violent drug gangs, and she lost her life. And we just lived about 100 yards from there. And so,
I'm sure.
But we had a choice. We could move, and they couldn't. The people there could not. And
not everyone is able to move. Do not think that every person has the same capabilities to move anytime, like the example that you give. People in Syria, they cannot move. Poor people cannot move. If they can move, they will move from poverty, but they cannot. So we are talking about peace. Everyone now in this last hour talking about peace, and we are feeling peace, and we are living peace. I don't think that our feeling of peace is the same as their feeling of peace.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an important insight. Did somebody else there want to say something?
Yeah, Hadi.
Yeah, this is me again, Hadi. So as I'm assuming because of my role as a moderator, all these Socrates cafes that we had in the past, I developed this kind of ability to kind of try to summarize at the end or whatever. I try to share with you what I learned from what I've heard from everyone. So one thing is that now I understand that there are maybe at least two types of peace. Peace of inner peace and outer peace, or a peace of mind that I was probably thinking of in the beginning when I was talking. But then there is this another type of peace where there's in a society, in a family, between nations, between countries. So that's a different thing, and it probably requires other answers. But I'm assuming there is lots of connections between the two. Maybe an inner peace can lead to some outer peace. Maybe this is something that Noor was talking about in the beginning. I use some two opposites to define peace, and I heard one at the end that made more sense. Maybe that conflict is a good opposite to understand peace, and it's maybe it's the lowest level of the opposite of peace. If you have to put levels starting like with war or whatever, conflict of ideas is maybe the simplest form of not having peace. Yesterday I was talking with Ahmed, who's next to me here, about the same question, and he mentioned a quote that I forgot who said it, but he said that you make peace with enemies, not with your friends. So if it looks like there's the default peacefulness between friends, that you don't need to actually work on making peace with them. So when you talk about peace, you immediately started talking about having something between enemies, or at least some conflicts in between that you have to make peace in between. At the end, I want to say, like, I tried to collect some answers from what everyone was saying. So I heard education is an answer to give peace a chance. I heard listening, understanding others, and tolerance with others. And I know this might sound cheesy to say, but these things are what Socrates Cafe does. Like, this is the first time I heard myself saying that Socrates Cafe leads to peace. But it's a genuine thought that I just came up with now. That's it.
Wow. Well, I think I know that it has helped me tremendously to have Socrates Cafes on a regular basis. Has helped me as a human being. In other settings, I can be a very impatient person. But it has helped me sort of modify or modulate my ability to take into account a lot of other perspectives than I otherwise would. I think we should end it here. I want to thank you all so very much for the gift of your time and your presence. Now that I see that this actually can work, some people had to leave. Unfortunately, it's a shame because, you know, I want everybody to be able to speak at least 2 or 3 times. And some people, I think, left thinking that they wouldn't have another opportunity when that's just not true, but it just takes time. I think we had a wonderful mix of people, and I hope it takes a commitment of your time and effort to make something like this. I think I will try this again in about 6 weeks, and I hope for the presence of many of you, and I hope that you can spread the word to others. And I want you to know how much you have my heartfelt thanks for being part of this. And it really makes my heart soar. And it gives me hope and heart for many things, and I hope we can do this again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good job, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much.